A running back at 10, taking no linemen on defense or on offense? A Freaky Friday mock draft edition gets into that scenario. What if Howie Roseman flips this whole thing on his head? He's usually a creature of habit, but we find out if he goes the opposite way of what we all expect. All that and more on today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Not one, but two mock draft episodes this week here on Locked On Eagles. Thank you for making us your first listen each and every single day. Our everydayers, thank you for joining us here once again on this Friday edition of the show. I'm your host, Gino Camilleri. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's the last episode of the week. It's Friday. Couple weeks before the draft. We're less than 14 days until that first pick is made. And I was thinking today, what if Howie Roseman does the unthinkable? What if it's not Friday the 13th, but it's Friday the 14th, and I'm a big alliteration guy, and I said, let's do a Freaky Friday type of mock draft. And everybody's seen at least one of the nearly dozen iterations of Freaky Friday at this point in their life, and how things change in an unexpected way. That's the NFL. We don't really ever know for certain what is going to happen. Even when you think you do, especially in Philadelphia with Howie Roseman, this guy keeps you on your toes time and time and time again. And just when we thought last year's draft was going to be Jordan Davis and you potentially get another pick, and would it be a wide receiver? Would you take a guy on the offensive line? Oh, they go and get A.J. Brown, something that we did not expect to happen. And if you go back and watch our live reactions from that draft show, you'll see that us as Eagles fans didn't expect it as well as everybody else in the National Football League. But Howie Roseman always says that he fears not knowing if something is going to happen and he didn't know about it prior. So the A.J. Brown trade, yeah, I'm sure he called and said, hey, if there's any guys that you have that you want to move, I'm interested. Was A.J. Brown on the docket prior to maybe making that call to John Robinson? No. Was the idea of taking Jordan Davis even in the cards maybe 3 or 4 years ago with the way that Howie Roseman drafted back then in 2019, 2020? I don't know if he would have been. But now Howie Roseman, this guy who is ever evolving, ever changing in the Darwinism, which is the National Football League, the not for long league, which people call it, Howie Roseman has far surpassed many of those who have been on an equal playing field with him in his salary cap era. Everybody gets the same amount of draft picks and can do with just about anything that you want outside of comp picks. We know that that takes a little more skill to figure out how that formula works. But Howie Roseman, with 11 to 12 picks, with 5 picks, has always found a way to get what he needs. And maybe it's not a need today. Maybe it's a need in 2 or 3 years. And you look at the Cam Jurgens selection. That's not a need today, but when Jason Kelsey's gone, it's definitely a need. But what if Howie Roseman didn't do that? What if he did what a lot of fans want, what a lot of people not in the Philadelphia media who are mocking Bijan Robinson to the Eagles at 10? Like, what if they went that route? We always write those guys off and say, no, there's absolutely no way that's going to happen. Well, what if it does? As I said on the intro, this is the National Football League. You don't know what's going to happen, especially with Howie Roseman. Could he make that pick? I don't think he will, but let's have some fun with it. What if he does? There was talk on ESPN the other day that Jordan Reed, formerly of the Draft Network, who was over at ESPN, was saying that the talk is that the Eagles could possibly be interested in a running back in the first round, and potentially not at 10, but maybe at 30. You got to be open to all ideas. Like, what if they take a cornerback for the first time in 2 decades? What if they take a safety for the first time in God knows how long? It could happen. It very well could happen. As much as we like to believe that we know what Howie Roseman and the Eagles do, they build from the inside out. At the end of the day, outside of the maybe 20, 30 scouts in that building, along with the coaches and the general manager and the owner, you're not going to know who's on their draft board, how they're graded, maybe ever. Outside of Jerry Jones taking his whole draft grade book and flashing it to the cameras last year, not many teams show what their rankings ultimately are. So at the end of the day, if they make that Bijan Robinson pick, you'd have to believe that, just like they would have done maybe with Christian McCaffrey a couple of years ago, that he was far and away the best player on their board. And that's what we got to get into. We've been going along with the blue chip type of selections, the offensive linemen, the defensive linemen, the cornerbacks. It's Freaky Friday. We got to get into it. We got to have some fun with this. So the last two segments of this show, we are going to do a full 7-round mock drafts, all 6 selections that the Eagles currently have. And we're going to take some positions that usually on Mock Draft Monday we might not get into, but we're going to do that here. But first, this episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Ultimate Pro Football GM. If you haven't heard of Ultimate Pro Football GM, our everydayers, I'm sure you've heard it multiple times by now. Let me tell you about it. I have it on my phone. I cannot delete this app. It is just so addicting. And why is it so addicting? Well, if you're like us and you love team building and you have this maybe dream of becoming a general manager, or you just like playing through the lens of a general manager, that's exactly what Ultimate Football GM is. It is a strategic game where you manage every aspect of the team and you play through seasons. And when I mean seasons, I'm 20 seasons in. I know a bunch of guys over at the Locked On NFL Network have many seasons on top of what I have as well. It's so addicting. And why is it so addicting? Like I said, you control every aspect. Trades, you draft, you get to control even in-stadium things as well, hiring the right coaches, managing all the finances that go into negotiating players and terms. You think you know better than a GM, or you just want to get in on the action today, download Ultimate Football GM. It is completely free and playable offline. I'm telling you, download the app, go and play it, and you'll want to get your friends in on the action as well. Locked On Eagles listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On. That's all caps LOCKEDON in the game store. Make sure you go and check out ultimate-gm.com or look it up in the App Store. Ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. All right, everybody, welcome on back to this Freaky Friday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, getting into a Freaky Friday mock draft. And we thank you for joining us here yet again, our everydayers. You know who I am. I'm your host, Gino Camilleri. Lou DiBiase had some great episodes this week. He had Damian Parsons, formerly of the Draft Network, on his show yesterday, who is now over at Locked On NFL Draft. And next week, we're coming back with our penultimate Mock Draft Monday. We're going to get into a boatload of mock draft talk, a lot of positioning talk when it comes to what positions they might get in the draft, and maybe get into some fun with FanDuel. They got futures out for the draft. You know we're going to put some money down when it comes to the NFL draft over at FanDuel. But first, we have a full 6-round mock draft here at the Locked On Eagles podcast on this Freaky Friday edition of the show. And we are going to get right into it. PFF's mock draft simulator, all 7 rounds, 6 selections for the Philadelphia Eagles. And here we go. And we are ultimately on the clock. And what does happen? Well, the inevitable does happen. The one guy that I did this whole show for, the idea of potentially taking Bijan Robinson, they have to do it. It's Freaky Friday. The Eagles taking a first-round running back. This hasn't happened since the 40s, the Wing T era. Well, today we're doing it. The fantasy idea of having Bijan Robinson in this offense alongside A.J. Brown, alongside Devontae Smith, alongside Dallas Goedert, and all of these offensive linemen that are just premier players at their position, Bijan Robinson would be an absolute plug-and-play, potential offensive rookie of the year, 1,600 yards from scrimmage, do-it-all type of back. We're making the pick. Bijan Robinson with the first overall selection at pick 10. We haven't done it at all here on these airwaves. We crush anybody that says that this is a potential to happen. But what if? What if this does happen? One, I think it throws the entire NFL for a loop. It changes the entire paradigm of what they believe Howie Roseman would do. And at the same time, it should scare teams around the National Football League if they made this move. Because not only did you have such a premier offense last year, the highest output of points in a Super Bowl loss ever, well, you're just adding Bijan Robinson to an already stacked offense where defense, yeah, you have a lot of holes to replace. But man, if you just made this offense I'm not going to say the D word that Vince Young uttered all those years ago, but from a fantasy perspective, from like a Madden team building perspective, this move is done all day long. I mean, if you could be on Ultimate Football GM and make this selection, that would be a very smart move. Do I think how he does it at the end of the day? No, but it's Freaky Friday. We're doing it. Bijan Robinson at pick 10. Whew, that took a lot out of me to make that selection. I absolutely dread the idea that it does happen. If it does, power to the Eagles, power to Howie Roseman. The last time I thought of a pick that was like, no way this is going to happen, was when Jalen Hurts was selected a couple years ago. And look at us now. Look at us now. We're saying, man, this guy is arguably the best quarterback that the Eagles could potentially have in their entire franchise history if his trajectory keeps going this well. Well, man, what if they made another pick that we're saying, I didn't think it could happen, but what if? How good could this Eagles offense be with Bijan Robinson in there? And I think that's the appealing idea at the end of the day. What could this Eagles offense be on top of what it already is? So going to defense, you're thinking, oh, yeah, we'll probably make a defensive line pick here at 30 if they were to make that selection. How he likes to go in the trenches, maybe surprises us, goes offensive line, or maybe he shocks the entire world and takes a linebacker. Yes, a running back and a linebacker in the first round. What planet, what plane of existence, what reality for Howie Roseman would this be? I'm sure there is a reality out there somewhere that this does happen. And it's happening right now, right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. At pick 30, the Eagles are going to follow up their running back selection with Bijan Robinson and go my favorite backer in this class, Jack Campbell out of Iowa. Honestly, if they made this pick, I don't think I would be too upset with it because outside of Nakobe Dean, you don't really have much set there. Lou did a great episode on the linebacker position with the talk of Devon White potentially being traded. I don't think the Eagles use that high of an asset on a linebacker, nor do I think they use the 30th pick. But if they did, Jack Campbell, who is a do-it-all type of player, he graded out incredibly well if you're watching here on YouTube on PFF with a 91.9 overall grade last year. He is just a jack of all trades. When you look at Iowa linebackers, those defensive linemen at Iowa, they're asked to spill a lot of things to those backers, which are asked to be in an athletic position to where they can play back in coverage and come up and fill gaps as well. Jack Campbell, there's a reason he is coveted. And our friend Joe Marino over at Locked On Bills, he's very fond of Jack Campbell potentially going at pick 27 with the Eagles losing Tremaine Edmonds. Well, TJ Edwards goes and joins Tremaine Edmonds there in Chicago. What if they select his replacement and it's Jack Campbell? Well, that's what we're doing. We're going running back and linebacker with the first two picks. Call me crazy. Say what you want. The Philadelphia Eagles make two solid picks when it comes to players. I think Jack Campbell is going to be a stud in this league for a long time. Bijan Robinson is easily a top 5 player graded out along many people's boards. Now you're saying, okay, at pick 62, like what's going to happen here? Could they draft another quarterback? Could they potentially draft somebody to back up Jalen Hurts? No, I don't think they go that crazy. I do not think they go that crazy just yet. Well, what if they go and take another interior offensive lineman? No, I don't think they do that. What I think they do is I think they finally take a safety and not make a top 100 selection on an offensive or a defensive line player. How crazy would that be? Incredibly crazy. Because the Eagles build from the inside out. Would they draft a corner as well, which would fit into the Andy Reid level of team building, which Howie Roseman has structured his team building off of, where give me 2 tackles, 2 guys to rush the passer, 2 corners, and I'll figure the rest out? No, I think they're going to skip that as well here on this Freaky Friday edition, and I think they go safety. And you're saying maybe like a single high safety, somebody that could potentially take the place of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, maybe a Sidney Brown. No, they're going Jordan Battle, somebody who plays 10 yards and in. They got Reed Blankenship and him now that are going to potentially be that third linebacker for you at some times. And this opens up your ability to play those 2 high looks that Sean Desai wants to run. Would it be crazy for the Eagles not to take a corner, a lineman on either side of the ball, or even a tight end in the top 100? Absolutely. But that's not the point of the show. We're not doing how the Eagles think. We're doing what maybe the fans want, what maybe an alternate reality Philadelphia Eagles team has. And we're going to finish that up on the other side of this break. When we come back, we're going to make the final 3 picks for the Philadelphia Eagles, make the round 3 selection, and then we got to wait all the way until their 7th round selections, where we will finish up this Freaky Friday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. All right, everybody, finishing up this Friday edition of the show. I'm Gino Camilleri here at the Locked On Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. Thank you to our everydayers for tuning in 1, 2, maybe even 4, 5 episodes per week. We've been doing this thing for 1,100 episodes at this point. It is another mock draft, not Mock Draft Monday, where we do what we think the Eagles are going to do, potentially trade down, potentially trade up. Well, we've stayed put with all of these picks. We made a pick at running back at 10, linebacker at 30, and at pick 62, we went with a safety. And none of those positions were what you would believe the Eagles would take. You believe they would go line. You believe they would go corner, potentially a tight end, maybe a cornerback, all in the top 100. And they didn't do any of that. And I'm going to follow that pick up. And our 3rd round selection, the first pick to finish up this segment of the show, is going to go to Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the quarterback out of UCLA. And you're thinking, no way do they spend pick 94 on a quarterback. Well, maybe they do. What is your backup plan right now? Yeah, you bring in Marcus. Marcus is a good player for a year. But you're going to have to cut costs at that backup quarterback position. You're going to have to. Once Jalen Hurts signs his extension, you're not going to be able to sign these guys for $6 to $10 million at that backup QB position. That could potentially get you a starting safety in this league, or a rotational edge rusher like Brandon Graham. You're going to have to invest in a guy that you believe could win you 2 to 3 games, and it might have to come at the hands of a rookie deal that you take within the top 100. And DTR, with his athleticism, his arm strength, his ability to throw multiple different route trees. If you watch UCLA and what Chip Kelly does, he has those wide receivers doing crazy things with crazy route concepts. He's a good processor of the game, and he fits exactly what you look for at the quarterback position, when the athleticism can make up for maybe some of the decision-making concerns, or maybe some of the arm talent concerns. And that's exactly the pick that they made in Jalen Hurts a few years ago. Why not go and get an identical player in DTR with that pick? Now, would they pick DTR in this class? Yeah, absolutely. At pick 94, no, I think that would be downright insanity. You have to stock up on defense. You have to try and fix the holes that you've lost in how many starters on that side of the ball. You have to continue to add to your offense, where your second tight end could be upgraded, your third wide receiver could be upgraded. I don't think they make that selection at 94, but why not? Why not? What if? We have to live in that reality of what if. Like, what if the Eagles won the Super Bowl in 2017? It happened with Nick Foles. And we're going to say this is crazy? Once that happened, anything that happened in this Eagles universe, in Eagles lore, I knew it was just, it had to be reality at that point, because the Eagles won a Super Bowl with Nick Foles. Anything else written after that couldn't be fake. It's all fiction. we're living in the best reality when it comes to fantasy or actual football teams, because the way Howie Roseman builds his team is like a fantasy football team. And how we're doing it right now is a running back in Bijan Robinson, a linebacker in Jack Campbell. With the 62nd pick, you go with Jordan Battle at the safety position, not somebody who's truly a one high, but can come down and play those cover 2 looks. And then you go quarterback at 94. So how do you finish this? How do you finish this? What are the Eagles going to do here? Well, I think maybe, just maybe, it is time to add a punter. Out of all the things to happen, what if they did add a punter? And why not add one of the better ones in Michael Turk out of Oklahoma? Would it be crazy for the Eagles to add a punter? No. Aaron Sipos, man. He needs some competition. They need to figure out something there. Figure out a way to upgrade a position that has hidden yards, and you just sat on your hands for so long, and heck, it inevitably cost you a huge play and big-time field position in the Super Bowl. Why not take one of the better guys in college? You've seen young punters coming into this league and doing well. Look at Tommy Townsend for Kansas City. Comes in, I believe he was an undrafted free agent for Kansas City. Comes in and, heck's got multiple rings with him now, if I'm not mistaken. Why not? Why not? This is what this episode is about. Why not? So finally, what if they do something even crazier and don't take a lineman at all? They already took a running back. What if they took a fullback? What if they ended this draft with a fullback? What would be crazier than that? I'm going with Hunter Lepke. I knew he would be on the board right here. This would be the ultimate Freaky Friday. Like, nothing we've done on this show would be crazier than this outcome right here. That with 6 selections, the Eagles walk away with running back Bijan Robinson, linebacker Jack Campbell, safety Jordan Battle, QB Dorian Thompson-Robinson, all within the top 100, punter Michael Turk, and a fullback Hunter Lepke. I don't think Eagles fans would be happy. It would be insane. For me, I would be more than okay with the Turk and the Lepke picks. I don't know about the first 4, but you have to think, what if? With Howie Roseman, it always has to be what if. This was an experiment in having fun with these mock draft simulators, because in ultimately 12 days, you probably won't do another mock draft for 5 months. So I wanted to have some fun on this Friday with it and ultimately bring up the idea of what if. You never know what could happen in the NFL draft. You never know how the board is going to fall. Did I think Clelin Ferrell was going to go 4th overall to the Raiders a couple years ago? No. Did I think the Giants were going to draft Dexter Lawrence and Daniel Jones within a couple picks of each other? Absolutely not. Did I think the Eagles could trade for A.J. Brown with that 18th pick last year? No way on earth. No way on earth did I think that was going to happen. But what if? What if they make these picks? What if Bijan is the selection? You just have to be ready for every situation to happen. And that's what this was. It was a Freaky Friday edition of the show, the final episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast this week. We will be back next week. Monday is Mock Draft Monday. We have 4 episodes after that getting into all the draft talk. It's our penultimate mock draft on Monday. Then we get into our final one the coming Monday, and then it's draft week. I can't believe we're already there, but continue to make this your first listen each and every day. Thank you to our everydayers who have tuned in for 1, 10, 100, 1,000 episodes. Make sure you tune in Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, wherever you get your podcast or on video form at YouTube as well. Thank you for tuning in. I am Gino Camilleri, your host. Lou DiBiase will be back next week. You can follow us on Twitter at DiBiaseLOE. Follow myself at GC24_football. Follow the mothership at Locked On Birds. Make sure you rate, subscribe wherever you get your shows. Follow all the other shows over at the Locked On Podcast Network. And remember, as always, fly, Eagles, fly.